Welcome to AI and the Cross, a podcast series examining the role of artificial intelligence in the life of the church. Brought to you by SimpRef. Confessional, constitutional, controlled. A confessional, reformed theological AI assistant designed to serve the church. Please subscribe and like our YouTube podcast. Remember to turn on notifications so that you can stay up to date. On this episode, we'll be discussing an AI use policy for churches.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Mike Prentice, and today we're talking about something that a lot of churches are beginning to wrestle with, whether they realize it yet or not: artificial intelligence. And to help us think through this, I'm joined by Robert Pearson. Bob and I have known each other for a long time, and when the conversation turns to technology, leadership, and the church, he's one of the first people I call.
Mike, it's good to be here.
Bob, the reason I wanted to have this conversation is simple. Artificial intelligence is suddenly everywhere. Pastors are hearing about it, staff members are experimenting with it, volunteers are discovering tools on their own, and in many cases, it's already being used inside churches, whether leadership has addressed it or not.
That's exactly right. The conversation is no longer about whether churches will encounter AI. They already have. The real question now is whether church leaders will take responsibility for how it's used.
And when people hear that, the first thing many leaders think is, great, now we need to write a policy.
Which immediately scares them.
Because most people think a policy means 28 pages of legal language that nobody will ever read.
Exactly. They imagine committees, lawyers, endless examples, and a document that tries to predict every possible situation.
But that's not really what a policy is supposed to be.
No, a real policy is much simpler than that. A policy is a statement of non-negotiables. It answers the question, what principles will govern how we act?
Not every possible scenario.
No, because scenarios change, technology changes, but principles remain stable.
And that's especially important when we're talking about artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. AI is evolving rapidly. New tools appear every month. New capabilities appear every year. If a church tries to write a handbook covering every situation, that handbook will be obsolete almost immediately.
So instead of trying to control every scenario,
we establish the principles that will govern all of them.
Which is exactly what the policy we're discussing today is designed to do.
Yes, it's short, it's direct, and it states clearly what the church will and will not allow when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence.
Authority and accountability. Artificial intelligence holds no authority in the church. Bob, why does the policy begin there? Why start by saying AI holds no authority in the church?
Because the moment a church introduces tools like this, the temptation is to let the tool start making decisions. This policy draws a hard line. AI can assist with drafting, organizing information, or summarizing research. It does those things quite well. However, no one in the church should be using AI as a substitute teacher or in a decision-making position. Authority in the church always rests with named human leaders who are accountable before God and before the people they serve. Every use of AI must have a responsible human owner. Nothing can be blamed on the AI. If something is wrong or misleading, responsibility belongs to the leader who chose to use the tool. And Mike, this is important, so hear me clearly. I do not know what else I can promise you. But I can promise you this. When you use AI tools, things will go wrong.
Seriously?
Oh, brother, you can count on that. Look, though some of the concepts behind large language models date back to the 16th century, it's only recently that we have figured out the scalability and power behind what they can do. The technology is, in many ways, still very young. Add to that a competitive landscape forcing sometimes poor updates and downright sloppy implementations, and a very new user base, and the stage is set for something to go very wrong, and at the worst time.
I hear you. At some point, I want to hear about how LLMs were thought of in the 1500s. But for now, we can summarize it as authority and accountability in the church always remain human responsibilities, regardless of the tool. Okay, number 2. Purpose and limits of AI use. AI may be used only in ways that support and strengthen human ministry, not replace it. Bob, what limits does that actually place on how churches should use AI tools?
It means the church must be very clear about why the tool is being used in the first place. Efficiency and convenience are not sufficient reasons to use these tools. AI must serve the mission of the church, not quietly reshape it. The policy warns that AI must never be used to move responsibility from the very human side of ministry. Regardless of how much the tools may mature in the coming years, there will never be a time when it's better to send an AI to be with a grieving widow or in some way visit someone in the hospital. At best, that would appear to be uncaring, and most people would see using AI in that manner as something akin to job abandonment. The goal is not to use AI to make ministry faster. The goal is to use these tools in a way that allows the church to continue to do ministry faithfully.
The third policy statement is non-delegable domains. Certain responsibilities in the church can never be delegated to artificial systems. Bob, how is this different than the second policy principle we just reviewed?
These aren't just job duties. They're the heartbeat of what it means to lead spiritually. Now we're talking about things like doctrine, pastoral judgment, church discipline, and even spiritual guidance. When you put it all together, what you're really describing is a person who stands accountable before God and the church for the souls in their care. That's not a role you stumble into. That's a calling. AIs do not have a calling per se. They are built for purpose.
I don't mean this the wrong way, but is this actually a problem in churches today? Do people put this kind of weight on an AI system?
Sadly, this is a major problem with the use of AI tools in churches today. It makes sense to use AI to parse through multiple systematic theology to find the elusive answer to a tough question. AI may assist preparation, research, or organization. But the judgment itself, the pastoral responsibility, must remain entirely human.
So the line is very clear. AI might have its place, but when it comes to pastoral judgment, you never delegate to an AI. This next one is really interesting to me. Transparency and trust. The use of AI in the church must never undermine trust through secrecy, surprise, or misrepresentation. Bob, why is transparency such a critical principle here?
Because trust is the currency of ministry. When people discover that technology has been used in ways they were never told about, trust erodes quickly. The policy calls for reasonable transparency. Leaders and staff should understand how AI is being used in their work. AI-assisted content should not be presented as purely human, when that would be misleading. And people affected by AI use should not later discover it as a surprise. At the same time, transparency does not mean turning every prompt or every technical detail into a public spectacle. The goal is simple: preserve trust.
Well, Bob, since we are on the subject of transparency, I think I should be 100% transparent and admit I'm not really here at all. I'm a third-generation AI voice. My script was written by human hands, but my voice and many of the visuals you've seen today were AI-enhanced.
The same is true for me too, Mike. I might sound real. However, I've never actually said a real word in my electronic life. In fact, I've never even taken a real breath.
That's what we mean when we talk about transparency. Be clear about what's, quote, real, unquote. Our voices might not be what you expected. However, we are speaking for a group of people who want to see that when AI tools, or any modern technology, are used in the church, it should be done intentionally and with the right notifications in place. Let's keep going. Next on the list, at number 5, should not be new for anyone, but is easy to overlook when using AI. This policy says, data stewardship and privacy. Data entrusted to the church is a moral responsibility, not simply a technical asset. Bob, what does that mean when AI tools are involved?
It means leaders must treat information entrusted to them with extreme care. Churches often hold deeply personal information, including counseling conversations, notes on family struggles, private prayer requests, and other personal information. That kind of material should never be casually placed into any AI systems without explicit permission and clear safeguards. Unless you have specific knowledge to the contrary, you should never consider these tools as secure or safe. Data protection must always be considered first. Convenience can never outweigh stewardship. Protecting people must always come before experimenting with technology.
This next one really struck me. It says, human formation and work habits. AI does not correct poor leadership habits. It amplifies them.
That may be the most uncomfortable principle in the entire document. If leadership is already avoiding hard conversations, AI will make avoidance easier. If workflows are already inefficient or opaque, AI will accelerate that confusion rather than clarify it. Whatever you're doing poorly when it comes to ministry, AI will only make it worse. Sound procedures and effective ministry principles should be in place before adding AI to the mix.
But the policy also warns about the opposite problem, the excitement that comes with new technology.
Exactly. Resistance should be heard and taken seriously, but excitement should never override discernment. Healthy leadership examines both. AI does not replace wisdom. In fact, in and of itself, no AI tool really has wisdom. They can quote wisdom. They can even sound very wise. However, that is not the same as having wisdom.
So whatever leadership culture exists in a church today, AI will simply magnify it tomorrow.
Mike, that is exactly what we are saying. AI will not fix your broken processes. It just makes them more obvious.
Last one, Bob. It says readiness, discipline, and the right to stop. The use of AI in the church is conditional, not permanent. Bob, that last line in the policy caught my attention. The right to stop. Why include that?
The church should never start taking its cues from the tools it uses. If AI begins getting in the way of trust, if it starts replacing actual human care, if people are left confused, or if leaders begin using it to dodge responsibility, then that's the moment to step back. And if it's working against the very principles we're trying to protect, then leaders need to be willing to shut it down altogether. The church must never feel trapped by technology. Technology serves the mission. The mission does not serve the technology.
It gets back again to knowing when not to use a tool.
Mike, when the tool is becoming a distraction, or when it becomes the star of the show, it's time to turn it off and do something different.
Bob, we've just walked through all 7 of the principles in this policy.
And listeners probably noticed something right away. This isn't a 28-page document. It doesn't try to list every situation a church might face or every tool that might appear in the future. That's intentional. A policy statement isn't meant to be an encyclopedia of examples. Technology like artificial intelligence is moving far too quickly for that. By the time you finished writing it, it would already be outdated.
So instead of trying to anticipate every scenario, this document focuses on something much simpler.
Principles, non-negotiables, the things leadership is not willing to compromise. Those principles act as guardrails within the normal structure of how the church already governs itself day to day. They don't replace leadership, they support it. They remind us that authority, responsibility, and care for people remain human responsibilities.
And that really matters with a technology like this.
It does. Artificial intelligence is powerful, but it isn't neutral. Tools like this tend to magnify whatever already exists inside an organization. If leadership is careless, the technology will magnify that carelessness. If leadership avoids responsibility, the technology will make that avoidance easier. But if leadership is thoughtful, disciplined, and faithful, then the technology can strengthen the work rather than distort it.
Which brings us back to the purpose of the policy itself.
Exactly. These principles exist to protect something very specific: people, trust, leadership responsibility, and the integrity of ministry itself. Churches are free to adapt a framework like this to their own context. But ignoring the impact of artificial intelligence in the life of the church today would be foolish. The technology is already here, and it will only become more common.
So the real question isn't whether churches will encounter AI.
The real question is whether they will lead its use responsibly.
And that's why this policy exists.
Yes, so that when technology inevitably magnifies something inside the church, what it magnifies is faithfulness.
Bob, thank you for walking through this with us today.
My pleasure, Mike.
And for those listening, the full policy document is available for you to download and review with your leadership team. Read it, discuss it, adapt it if necessary. But most importantly, take the time to think carefully about how your church will approach this technology. I'm Mike Prentice.
And I'm Robert Pearson.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and hit the like button for us so that we can continue to bring this type of podcast free of charge. Look for these titles in the AI and the Cross series.